Hollywood is built on chemistry. Some of the most iconic friendships, romances, and partnerships in film history looked completely effortless on screen. The problem is, cameras only capture part of the story. Behind the scenes, some actors who played best friends couldn't stand being in the same room together. Others spent months arguing on set, refused to speak between takes, and in some cases became involved in feuds that lasted years after filming had ended. What's fascinating is that audiences rarely notice. The Notebook became one of the most beloved romance films ever made, despite reports that its two stars struggled to work together during production. Dirty Dancing created one of cinema's most memorable on-screen relationships, even though tensions between the leads were very real behind the scenes. And in some cases, the conflict became so severe that it spilled far beyond the set, resulting in public feuds, lawsuits, and years of bitter exchanges. Today, we're looking at some of Hollywood's most famous co-stars who appeared inseparable on screen, but reportedly couldn't stand each other once the cameras stopped rolling. Starting with perhaps the most surprising example of them all, Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams. Looking back now, it's difficult to imagine The Notebook without either of them. Released in 2004, the film became a cultural phenomenon and helped turn both actors into household names. Their chemistry felt so natural that many viewers assumed they must have instantly connected during filming. According to director Nick Cassavetes, the reality was very different. During production, Gosling reportedly became so frustrated that he approached Cassavetes and asked for another actress to be brought in to read lines opposite him. The director later recalled Gosling saying he simply wasn't getting what he needed from the scenes. At the time, tensions between the two actors had reportedly reached a point where they struggled to work together effectively. For most productions, that level of conflict would be a serious problem. But in a strange twist, the friction didn't last forever. As filming continued, the relationship between Gosling and McAdams gradually improved. The two eventually began dating in real life and remained together for several years after the film's release. The same actors who reportedly couldn't stand each other at the beginning of production ended up becoming one of Hollywood's most talked-about couples, which just proves that sometimes first impressions aren't always accurate. Unfortunately, not every Hollywood feud has such a happy ending. Next on the list are Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze. If you've ever seen Dirty Dancing, you'll know exactly why this story is so surprising. The film is remembered largely because of the chemistry between its two leads. The connection feels authentic. The tension feels real. Even decades later, audiences still consider it one of the most believable on-screen romances ever created. Ironically, some of that realism may have come from the fact that the two actors weren't exactly getting along. Their history actually began before Dirty Dancing. A few years earlier, both actors appeared in Red Dawn, and according to Jennifer Grey, their personalities often clashed. She later described Swayze as talented and passionate, but also said some of his behavior on set frustrated her. His practical jokes and energetic nature sometimes rubbed her the wrong way, creating tension between them long before they reunited for their most famous film. When production began on Dirty Dancing, those old frustrations hadn't completely disappeared. At the same time, the pressure surrounding the project was enormous. Nobody involved knew whether the film would succeed. The budget was relatively small, expectations were low, and everyone was working under tight deadlines. Swayze took the dancing sequences extremely seriously. Grey, meanwhile, often approached scenes with a different energy. She sometimes laughed during rehearsals and struggled with certain dance routines, which reportedly tested Swayze's patience. Years later, Swayze explained that some of the frustration audiences see in the finished film wasn't acting at all. In certain scenes, he was genuinely trying to keep Grey focused during difficult rehearsals. What's remarkable is that instead of hurting the film, the tension arguably made it stronger. The uncertainty, nervousness, and occasional frustration between the characters felt authentic because some of those emotions were actually happening behind the scenes. The result was one of the most successful romantic films ever made. Unlike many Hollywood feuds, however, this wasn't a situation where the two actors despised one another. Over time, both expressed respect for each other's talent and contribution to the film. In fact, when Patrick Swayze passed away in 2009, Jennifer Grey spoke warmly about the experience they shared and the impact he had on her life. So while their relationship may have been complicated, it was ultimately built on mutual respect. The next story, however, is very different. Because unlike Dirty Dancing, this feud involved insults, public comments, and a relationship that appeared broken almost from the beginning. And it all happened during the filming of a major Hollywood comedy. Julia Roberts and Nick Nolte.
By the early 1990s, Julia Roberts was one of the biggest stars in the world. Fresh off the success of Pretty Woman, she had become one of Hollywood's most bankable actresses, capable of turning almost any project into a major event. Nick Nolte, meanwhile, was already an established actor with a reputation for playing tough, charismatic characters. On paper, pairing the two together seemed like a guaranteed success. The film was I Love Trouble, a romantic comedy centered around two rival journalists who constantly clash before eventually falling for one another. Ironically, the plot wasn't far from reality. Almost from the start, reports began emerging that Roberts and Nolte struggled to get along behind the scenes. While neither actor has ever fully detailed every disagreement, both have acknowledged that tensions existed throughout production. In an interview years later, Roberts described Nolte as someone who could be incredibly charming one moment and incredibly difficult the next. She even suggested that he sometimes seemed determined to push people away. Nolte didn't completely deny the friction. Looking back, he admitted that mistakes were made and accepted responsibility for at least part of the conflict. According to him, both actors contributed to the situation, and the production became far more difficult than it needed to be. Rumors surrounding the feud became so widespread that they eventually overshadowed the film itself. Instead of discussing the story or performances, much of the media attention focused on what was allegedly happening between the two stars when the cameras weren't rolling. For any movie, that's a dangerous position to be in. Audiences can forgive a bad review. What they don't always forget is constant negative publicity. When I Love Trouble was released, it received mixed reviews and failed to become the major hit many expected. To this day, discussions about the film often focus less on the movie itself and more on the relationship between its leading actors. It's one of the clearest examples of how behind-the-scenes conflict can sometimes become bigger than the project it was attached to. But as messy as that situation was, it still pales in comparison to what happened on the set of Charlie's Angels. Because this wasn't just a disagreement between co-stars. According to one actress, it escalated into a confrontation involving direct insults in front of cast members and crew. And unlike many Hollywood feuds that stay hidden for years, details of this one eventually became public. The stars involved were Bill Murray and Lucy Liu. And what started as creative frustration quickly turned into one of Hollywood's most talked about on-set clashes.
When Charlie's Angels hit cinemas in 2000, it quickly became one of the biggest action comedies of the year. The film's combination of action, humor, and star power helped turn it into a massive commercial success, while also introducing a new generation of viewers to the classic television franchise. At the center of it all were Drew Barrymore, Cameron Diaz, and Lucy Liu. The trio appeared to have great chemistry on screen, helping sell the idea that they were a close-knit team capable of taking on any challenge thrown their way. But according to Lucy Liu, not everyone on set shared that same energy. Years after the film's release, Liu opened up about an incident involving Bill Murray, who played Bosley in the movie. According to her account, tensions began during the filming of a particular scene. While Murray had reportedly been away from set, creative discussions and adjustments were made involving other cast members. When he returned, his frustration appeared to boil over. Liu later claimed that Murray began making comments and insults during rehearsals. At first, she couldn't believe they were directed at her. She even recalled looking around to see if he was speaking to someone else. But as the exchange continued, it became clear she was the target. For many actors, especially those still establishing themselves in Hollywood, a confrontation with an established star could be intimidating. Bill Murray was already a comedy legend. Lucy Liu was still in the earlier stages of her career. Yet instead of backing down, Liu chose to stand her ground.
She later explained that despite having less influence over the creative process than some of her co-stars, she felt it was important to defend herself. The confrontation reportedly became heated enough that production temporarily stopped while tensions were addressed. Over the years, various versions of the story have circulated, with different people offering different perspectives on exactly what happened. But regardless of the details, one thing is clear. The relationship between Murray and Lou was far from smooth. In fact, the tension became so significant that Murray did not return for the sequel, Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle. His role was ultimately replaced by another actor. What's fascinating is that audiences would never have guessed any of this from watching the film. On screen, everything appears perfectly normal. The jokes land, the chemistry works, the movie flows exactly as intended. It's another reminder that what viewers see is often only a small fraction of what's happening behind the scenes. And speaking of surprising behind-the-scenes relationships, the next story may be the most shocking so far. Because unlike the previous examples, these two actors didn't just argue during production. Their feud became so public and so personal that fans were still talking about it decades later. The strange part? They were supposed to be portraying four inseparable best friends. Instead, one of television's most iconic friendships may have hidden one of Hollywood's longest-running rivalries. This is the story of Sarah Jessica Parker and Kim Cattrall.
For years, Sex and the City was one of the most successful television shows on the planet. Audiences fell in love with Carrie, Samantha, Charlotte, and Miranda, watching the four friends navigate relationships, careers, and life in New York City. Part of the show's appeal was how believable their friendship felt. Whether they were sharing cocktails, discussing their latest romantic disasters, or supporting one another through difficult moments, the chemistry between the cast seemed effortless, which is why many fans were shocked when rumors began emerging that not everyone got along behind the scenes. At the center of the speculation were Sarah Jessica Parker and Kim Cattrall. For years, reports suggested there was tension between the two actresses, although both often avoided discussing the issue publicly. As the show continued to grow in popularity, so did the rumors. Questions about salaries, creative control, and personal relationships frequently appeared in entertainment magazines. Still, much of it remained speculation. Then came the event that changed everything. In 2018, after the passing of Kim Cattrall's brother, Sarah Jessica Parker publicly expressed her condolences. For most people, it appeared to be a simple gesture of sympathy. But Cattrall's response stunned fans. In a now famous social media post, she rejected Parker's comments entirely. She stated that she did not need Parker's support and accused her former co-star of being insincere. She went even further, describing Parker as a hypocrite and insisting that they were neither family nor friends. For many fans, it was the first undeniable confirmation that the relationship between the two women was far worse than anyone had realized. Suddenly, years of rumors seemed far more believable. The fallout became headline news. Articles dissected every interview, every public appearance, and every comment either actress had made over the years. The feud became so widely discussed that it even influenced the future of the franchise itself. When plans for a third Sex and the City film collapsed, many observers pointed to ongoing tensions among the cast as a contributing factor. Whether that was the sole reason remains unclear. But what is clear is that one of television's most famous friendships never fully translated into real life. And unlike some Hollywood feuds that eventually fade away, this one became increasingly public as time went on. Yet even that doesn't compare to the next story. Because while the previous examples involved arguments, creative differences, and personal grievances, the next conflict has evolved into a legal battle worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A dispute so explosive that it continues to dominate entertainment headlines to this day. And it involves two people who were supposed to be portraying a passionate romance on screen: Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni.
If you've followed entertainment news over the past year, you've almost certainly heard the names Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. What began as excitement surrounding a major film adaptation eventually transformed into one of Hollywood's most controversial and closely watched disputes. The project at the center of it all was It Ends With Us. Based on the best-selling novel, the film generated enormous anticipation long before its release. Fans were eager to see how the story would be adapted for the screen, and early interest suggested it could become one of the year's biggest films. On paper, everything seemed to be in place. Blake Lively was one of Hollywood's most recognizable actresses. Justin Baldoni wasn't just starring in the film, he was also directing it. But as the promotional campaign began, fans started noticing something unusual. The cast didn't appear to be interacting the way audiences expected. Press appearances felt different. Social media activity was being analyzed. Viewers began speculating that something behind the scenes wasn't quite right. At the time, most people dismissed the rumors as typical internet speculation. Then the situation escalated dramatically. What followed was no longer a story about creative differences or personality clashes. Instead, it became a legal battle. Lively filed legal claims alleging misconduct during production and claimed she had been subjected to behavior that created serious concerns during the making of the film. Baldoni strongly denied the allegations. The dispute rapidly expanded, drawing in publicists, legal teams, and multiple high-profile figures connected to both sides. Before long, the story had evolved into one of the most talked-about conflicts in modern Hollywood. Every new filing generated headlines. Every public statement was analyzed. Every detail became the subject of intense debate online. Unlike the previous stories in this video, this wasn't a feud that existed primarily through interviews or second-hand accounts. This was now a matter being fought through legal channels, with both sides firmly maintaining their positions. As a result, the situation remains ongoing, and many of the questions surrounding the dispute have yet to be answered definitively. What makes the story particularly striking is the contrast between what audiences expected and what eventually unfolded. People anticipated a film release. Instead, they witnessed one of the most public and complex Hollywood disputes in recent memory. And while it's impossible to know how the situation will ultimately be remembered, it has already secured a place as one of the most dramatic examples of behind-the-scenes conflict involving on-screen co-stars. But perhaps the biggest lesson from all of these stories is that appearances can be incredibly deceiving. Because if Hollywood has taught us anything, it's that chemistry isn't always friendship. The performances we remember most are often the result of talented professionals doing their jobs, regardless of what might be happening behind the scenes. Some feuds eventually become friendships, some friendships eventually fall apart, and some conflicts grow so large they become part of Hollywood history. Yet when the cameras start rolling, audiences rarely see any of it. All they see is the finished product. Which makes you wonder, how many of your favorite on-screen friendships, romances, and partnerships were actually hiding a completely different story once the director yelled cut?